Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So we're going to talk a little bit about Cory, and then we'll go into talking about your successful Kickstarter campaign. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit of your background, maybe where you grew up, a little bit about you.
That is really boring. No.
I don't think anything would be boring after that video.
Yeah, right? I actually grew up locally. I lived in Dana Point, and so that's about 40 minutes from here. So I am Southern California born and raised.
You're a native.
Yeah, for sure. And got lucky because there's actually, at least there was, and there is now, 20 years ago when I sort of first entered the job market, there was actually a pretty robust video games industry in Southern California. And it was Virgin, which was actually across the street from here, and Interplay were the two big video game companies. And having grown up as a hardcore gamer and someone who really wanted to be in the games industry my whole life, it was just lucky that I happened to live in a place where there was an opportunity.
So were you a gamer since you were?
Yes, absolutely. I remember, I had a single dad, and I had a babysitter after school, and I think the first game I played was with my babysitter. She had a Monopoly, so she broke out Monopoly, and I think I was probably 8 years old at the time, and we played Monopoly every day for a month until I went one day and she said that she had lost it, and I was really upset. How do you lose a fucking Monopoly set? Like, no way. She was just sick of playing Monopoly every day, and so I told my dad, I don't want to go back. I can't go back. There's no Monopoly. And so then I went to Latchkey, which was worse. But so Monopoly was my first game. I love Monopoly. A lot of people in the hobby games industry love to shit on Monopoly because it's not a very modern style game in terms of its interactivity, but it's the place where a lot of people started, and I love it. What I told my friends, I go, you know what? It's like your really sexy mom. Like, you don't want to think about her that way, but thank God she was sexy at one time, or you wouldn't be here. So that's how I feel about Monopoly.
Wow.
So I was into board games, and then when the Atari 2600 came out, when I was about, I think, 7 or 8 years old, I was deeply, deeply in love, and from that point forward, it was just pretty much about games for me.
So what influenced you besides, was it the Monopoly game? What influenced you to take this career path?
Really, I really wanted to be in the games industry. I ended up going to an art school of all things and got a degree in design and marketing because I am not, I'm not what you would call smart, and so I needed to do something a little easy. And I felt like marketing. I was funny and could, be clever, and so that's not really good for much. And I thought, marketing is a place where that could be good for something. And I ended up getting a degree in marketing and design, and then left school and decided I wanted to be in the games industry still. I thought I was going to go one or two directions, either into writing television commercials and trying to be funny, or into games, and I chose games. And I actually called Atari when I got out of college, and I asked them, I said, listen, I want to come work there, and I really want to design games. And they said, you're a programmer? And I said, no, I'm not a programmer. I want to make up games. I want to come up with the characters and how they interact. And they go, well, that's programmers. And I said, are you kidding me? Programmers make up Mario and Luigi and Donkey Kong. A programmer makes up the story? And they said, yeah, that's all programmers. And I couldn't believe it. I was so crushed. And because I'm not an engineer, and I will never be an engineer, sadly. And they said, why don't you come work in the marketing group? Because no one, there are not a lot of people in marketing that really understand games at this point, because I'm sort of the, that first generation of people that were gaming since they were very, very young. And so I really understood intrinsically that consumer and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no way, I'm not going to do marketing. That sucks. I want to make games. And then the funny part of this story is that years and years later, when I actually went and did marketing for video games, I worked at a company called Midway, and Midway owned, at that point, Atari, and the Atari building that I worked in was the actual Atari building I had called all those years ago to say, I want to go work in games, and I ended up in marketing there. So that lady knew before me what I was going to be doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did Cryptozoic Entertainment, how did that come about? And how long has that been?
Cryptozoic is now 4 years old, so we're starting to actually have some nice roots, and we're doing great. Cryptozoic started, my partners and I got together, and we saw an opportunity. There was a game called the World of Warcraft trading card game that I actually created when I was at Upper Deck, and it was very successful and doing very well. And Blizzard actually stole me away to work for Blizzard and be the head of global licensing and development, business development. And so I went to work at Blizzard and was there for about 4 years, almost 5 years. And there were some problems with the licensee, Upper Deck, in terms of the World of Warcraft trading card game, and it needed a new home. And so my partners and I got together and we proposed that a new company be spun up to actually be a good home for the World of Warcraft TCG, which was about a $15 million a year business. And so Blizzard thought that was a great idea, and so I actually ended up leaving and joining my partners. Very experienced people. I'm super lucky to have here tonight, as an example, John Nee, who started Wildstorm with Jim Lee, 25, 30 years of sort of big-time executive level experience in the entertainment industry. My other partner, Scott Gata, was actually the person running the World of Warcraft TCG business at Upper Deck at the time that we started Cryptozoic and left to do this. And then John Sepnuk, our international and sales guy who speaks 6 languages and has been in the trading card industry for 20 plus years. So it was this really great sort of dream team come together to create Cryptozoic to be this good home for the World of Warcraft trading card game, and also a good home for other licensed board games. And so we made this decision early on because of, frankly, my partner John's access to licenses, that we could be this place where we made very high quality board games based on licensed properties. As you saw in the video, everything from Walking Dead to Big Bang Theory. In the past, licensed board games had been sort of a schlocky affair, people just using the brand and throwing anything like a crappy trivia game in a box and selling it to grandma because, oh, the kids love this show. And for us, we thought we could actually make really high quality board games that were very deep, very fun, really for that sort of larger audience of people that are sort of becoming actually bigger and bigger for the hobby games industry. And it sort of worked. We have in one of our games, The Walking Dead, we've sold hundreds of thousands of units of, which is a pretty big success for a board game. And most of our partners are very happy with the products that we've created. And so Cryptozoic started off as a place for the World of Warcraft TCG to live, but quickly became a good home for licensed board games and trading cards.
And how did you guys come up with the name Cryptozoic?
You know what, that's, I came up with a name, but it wasn't any great epiphany. It was really, looking for a name for an entertainment company is not easy. Every name in the world has been used. Like they're just all gone. And I was typing in different words and searching, and spell correct actually corrected Cryptozoic for me when I wrote it first. And I thought, oh my God, if spell check knows this word, then this has got to be a good word. And then I looked online, and there was, somebody had the Cryptozoic.com web domain, and I offered them $3,000 just out of the blue for it, and they sold it to me. And so I felt like, oh, well, that's not bad. Cryptozoic is kind of weird. It means, hidden creatures, and for a hobby games company, we could have it be associated with monsters. It seemed reasonably nonsensical, that it didn't mean much, and we had the web address, so it was a big win.
Wow. So let's switch gears for a moment, and let's talk about entrepreneurs. Because a lot of the people here in the audience are entrepreneurs, and we'd like to just get some information from you, being a successful entrepreneur, as far as, is there anything that you recommend to entrepreneurs to do? Maybe books they should read, things that maybe they can learn from, or is it pretty much on the job, just do it?
I think it's mainly, it's on the job. I will say that it is in many ways a burden. I think there are people, and both of my parents were both entrepreneurs, own their own businesses, and so I was raised in an environment where people didn't work for other people. You started your own business. That's sort of what you had to do. But it is a burden. Being an entrepreneur is in many ways awful. And I tell people frequently, if someone tells you having your own business is a good idea, punch them right in the mouth for me, because it is terrible. But for the people that are successful at it, I believe that they don't have a choice. You have to do this, that's it. And if that's not who you are, you're going to either have to get real lucky, or probably it's not going to work, because the level of sacrifice required to create something like a business is really disproportionate in some ways to the reward, and awful. And so, I guess the biggest thing for people who are trying to go this way is prepare yourself for failure. And I've said it, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I tell her all the time, because she gets very frustrated, she's very competitive. And I tell her all the time, I say, you know what, there's only one ability you have to master, and this is completely cheesy, but it's for a 9-year-old, so forgive me, but the one ability you have to master is the ability to not give up. Because everything else, whether that's talent, learned skill, luck, everything that goes into creating success hinges on one ability, and that is persistence. The ability to be knocked down over and over and over and just simply not give up is the really deciding factor between success and failure. Because people who get knocked down and then don't get back up, they failed. People who get back up, they're still in the game. They're still fighting. They're still at war. And so that ability to get back up means the war will never end for them until they meet their win condition. That's it. And so for someone like, for me, I'm destination only, I'm not journey at all. I will eat as much shit as I have to get a win condition, because that's just who I am psychologically. But that is, I think, a big piece of being a successful entrepreneur, is being able to understand that you're going to have to make incredible sacrifice, and also understand that you are going to fail over and over and over again. And the only thing that's going to make you into a success is the ability to get back up and try again.
So talking about failure, do you have any big failure that you might have learned from that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit of failure. I would say the big thing for startups is to be very, very careful. And this is one that my partners would laugh to hear me say this, but one of the things I've learned from all of this is that the ability to maximize every bit of resource you have. I think it's very easy for people to look at a startup and think, oh, I need this or that, or there's a million ways to spend your money when you're trying to create a business, and understanding that is the lifeblood that will determine whether or not you're able to last one more day, one more week, and every day and week that you last is another opportunity for something big to happen for you. Then you have to be so careful with your resources. And I've seen it from my friends, and in the games industry, it's so easy to I need a sexy office and a nice logo, and I need, and I did this exact thing when we started up, much to my partner's chagrin. And then having that realization later that Jesus, these things are not important. You need to keep as much of your resources available, because cash flow, which is the word I also learned a lot about as part of this process, is the killer. And it doesn't matter how successful you may be in the future, if you don't have the ability to fund that future, then you're never going to reach it. So it's incredibly important.
So let's now talk about your most recent success, which is their Kickstarter campaign, which we saw the video. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you decided to go the direction of crowdfunding, and what came about to get you guys to start that?
Yeah, the Kickstarter was an amazing success and a big deal for us. It was not the decision that we wanted to make. I mean, that was not the first choice, was let's go to Kickstarter. The project had actually been in development. Hex, as you saw, the MMOTCG had been in development for quite a while for us, but we had reached a point where we didn't have the funds to continue with that development. We went out to dozens and dozens of publishers and tried to raise the money to actually continue on with financial support from an investor or a publisher, and we had everyone turn us down. I mean, I must have done, and I'm, as you have seen in the video, I'm very passionate about this product. This product is the thing that I've always wanted to make. I can speak about this audience. I mean, trading card games, I've been playing trading card games for 20 years. I've been in the video games industry for 20 years. It's something that I understood deeply, both the consumer and the value proposition of this game. And as I would sit and talk to different people that may invest in the Hex, I could see their eyes glaze over almost immediately. So I'd say MMO, and anyone in the video game space, and I don't know how many people here know the game space very well, but I would say MMO in the video game space, and they would immediately recoil because MMOs are just a money sink. They are the dirtiest word when it comes to, you know, trying to create something new in the video games category, especially about a year and a half ago when some very high profile, big budget MMOs had just cratered. And so MMO was sort of a dirty word, and then I would say TCG, and their eyes would glaze over because they don't know what the fuck a TCG is. So I've now combined two acronyms, one they're afraid of and one they don't know what the hell it is. And it was, from that point forward, it'd be a pretty hard pitch. And then I'd get into like, no, but this innovation and this consumer, and I understand them, and people like me that have grown up playing these games are now in their 40s, they can't go out to a trading card game shop and play in the middle of the night. They still want to play. This is that nothing exists to fill. The first rule of product development, find a need and fill it. That's it. And so I had identified a need, and I had this amazing product that I thought would really resonate with this consumer. It was just a no-brainer. And I would be very excited and very passionate about it because I believe in it. And there was just no uptick. And we must have pitched, John and I traveled around and must have pitched 40 different groups, and no interest. So at that point, we had talked about doing a Kickstarter, and we realized that that was going to be the direction. And so I sat down and started to think about what it was I needed to communicate in that Kickstarter. And as you saw in the video is 10 minutes long, which is long for that's forever for a Kickstarter video. And everyone that I told, I originally was like 14, I cut it down to 11. Everyone I told that I had this Kickstarter video, and it was about 11 minutes long, were like, are you insane? You cannot put an 11-minute Kickstarter video because no one's gonna watch it. That's a terrible idea. And I would have agreed, but I had thought through it, and my idea was, if I could make it funny or outrageous or weird, then maybe, and again, this is the gamer in me because I'm always min-maxing everything. As a gamers are part grifter, and so I'm both of those things. So my idea was that X percentage of additional people may watch this video because someone recommended it to them because it was funny or weird or stupid or just outrageous. And I thought, you know what, I take the risk of cashing in my credibility because now 20 years in the games industry, I'm going to see this video and be like, you are a goofball. I don't think you should be running our business development group or working for us. And that was a risk. That was a real risk, and I was very nervous about it. But I thought, you know what? Even if 10% of these people say, "Hey, you got to watch this video" to a friend, that's 10% more people that will be watching it, and some percentage of them may give money. And so I felt like it was a calculated risk where I was taking some real liberties with my credibility, but hopefully it would get people to recommend it or to actually sit through a 10-minute video. And that was why I made that video. We filmed it. We actually didn't launch the Kickstarter. We waited as we were doing some more meetings with more publishers, and then some stuff fell through, and then we decided to launch it. And I got to say, like the 3 nights we decided we were going to do it later in that week, and the 3 or 4 nights before it, I did not sleep well at all, having nightmares every night about it. Like, it was nerve-wracking. To launch that Kickstarter, not only because everything rode on the success of it in terms of this game that I had at that point, myself and my partners at that point had invested, you know, 1.5 years, almost 2 years of our life in, like full-time, hard, you know, grinding work, and also all of this money had come down to this one thing, sort of the rubber meeting the road in terms of whether or not consumers were actually interested in a game like this. And I had told so many people that yes, they are, and I had bet all of my credibility, you know, both internally and externally on this idea that this product had to exist, and this was the moment when you were going to see in a very tangible way if you were right or wrong. And so it was terrifying.
And a lot of times people think that, oh, I'll just put up a video and we'll just be successful. There's a lot of time spent, I'm sure, in preparing your video or preparing for a Kickstarter campaign. You can't just go and start signing up and start filling in the blanks. You have to really plan, I think, to be successful. Did you guys spend time planning?
Yeah, there was a solid month of work that went into launching. I mean, a solid month of multiple people because the team on Hex, at the time I believe was about 15. We're up to about 35 now, where I had half of the team working on helping create this Kickstarter, and my product manager Will Brinkman and our systems designer guy Alex Charsky, full time working on helping me build that Kickstarter campaign. And so, and all said and done, we probably spent $30,000 on that Kickstarter campaign, so not a cheap thing to do either, but the production quality was an important piece of it to make sure that people understood that this was the real deal. And I think one of the mistakes that people will make in their Kickstarters is to be a little underprepared, although I think that's sort of changing as you've seen Kickstarter get bigger and bigger, and the rewards pay out in the millions of dollars. People are understanding how important it is to create an incredible presentation. But we spent a month. We had a full-fledged website. We were lucky, clearly, because we had a game that was in a rough stage of development where I could actually show some of it, which is a big deal. But we created a website. We created just an incredible amount of content to go along with the launch of that Kickstarter. And that was a big part of what made the difference, for sure.
What were some of the things, like the rewards that you gave, like to get people to pledge money towards your campaign? How did you guys come up with all those creative ideas?
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the biggest factors for the success of the Kickstarter. We're lucky, and this is, again, a deep understanding of your consumer is always the first place to start in any endeavor that's going to be directly interfacing with that consumer. So whether that's marketing, product development, customer service, it doesn't matter. An understanding of your audience is the place to start if you want to make them happy, you want to sell them something, you want to convince them of something. It all begins at that point. A deep understanding of our consumers was something that we had because myself and all the people I worked with are that consumer. And that has been sort of, for me, as a marketing person, as a product development person in the games industry, what's been my biggest sort of sword and shield has always been that I'm a gamer. I understand the consumer, and when I be in meetings with lots of executives or development people that weren't really gamers, they were more, engineers or salespeople, they would have to go back to the things I said and take it with a level of, they'd assign to me a level of credibility because I was the person they were trying to sell to. All of that played back into the Kickstarter and our preparation of those rewards. A deep understanding of the consumer that buys and plays TCGs really did inform a lot of what we did. Understanding that a virtual collectible has actual secondary market value, like other trading card games. I don't know if people are familiar with trading card games, but you buy packs of cards. The packs of cards have different levels of rarity. Some of the cards are worth more than others, like baseball cards, except they're used to play a game. Some of the cards could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars over the course of the life of the product. And so understanding that and understanding that virtual collectible is going to mean something to that consumer, we ramped up the rewards that you would get exponentially. And so for me to give away these virtual packs of cards, especially for a game that may or may not exist based on whether or not these people get on board, was a no-brainer for me. And so if you gave me $50, I gave you $100 worth of cards. If you gave me $75, I gave you $150 worth of cards, and I just kept doing that. And what that allowed me to do was create this exponential reward structure that was a slippery slope. And my goal was to get people to $120 because I felt like at $120, I had sort of maxed out what that consumer is probably comfortable with paying for a game that doesn't even exist yet, which is, I know, also lunacy. But we very carefully, and I spent a lot of time building in the hooks for each of the different tiers and making them those conceptual points. For me, and again as a consumer, if I'm going to spend $20 on something and I look and I see there's something for $35, it just hasn't hit that next $20 increment. And as I'm at $50, if it's going to cost me $65, it's basically the same. I mean, I'm not good with money, clearly, but it's basically the same amount of money. And if I made the rewards associated with what is psychologically not a big leap, a very big reward, I can typically drag you along to that next step. And now this is the sunk cost fallacy. Now that I spent $65, I'm in for $65, that's it. And then I look at 85 and I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding? For 85 I get this? And it's like, well, I gotta spend that. And so I kept that going all the way up to $120, where I put a collectible card that was hyper desirable, and I knew that people were going to want it, and that's where I sort of drove a lot of people to the $120. past that point, there needed to be a whole new strategy. And the whole new strategy really became about people's need to identify themselves in a community. And so in the TCG community, there's different types, and MMO community, there's different types of players. And so what we did was we created all these tiers that were $250 a piece, and they had a name. And so one was the pro player, one was the collector, one was the raid leader. And so what I did was craft a series of rewards that were only available inside of that tier for that player that spoke directly to why you would want to play the game. And so you haven't really seen this on, I don't think, any other Kickstarters. I haven't seen anyone else do it. But the deep understanding of the consumer let me segment them into who they were as a gamer and then speak to them with rewards that were very specific. And then I gave them one more, so there were 5 of those. And if for $500, I'll give you all 5 of them. So you don't have to pick at that point. You can have all 5 for $500. And then from there, I started getting into the vanity stuff. So for $1,000, you can have your picture on a card, which is very attractive for a large segment of the people who play trading card games. And then it just got more and more zany from that point, all the way up to I had 15 tiers at $10,000. And at $10,000, you would get every card we ever make from now until the end of this game. You would get every piece of equipment. You get to design your own dungeon. Come to our office and sit down with our designers, design your own dungeon, and you come up with all the thematics and we'll make it. And we sold all 15 of the $10,000 tier, which is super uncommon. Most people don't offer a $10,000 tier, and then they have 1 or 2. We actually sold out of all 15, which I'm not sure that there are many other Kickstarters that actually have sold that many top end. We may be number 1 in terms of selling that top end tier, because they max you out at $10,000. And so the rewards, were one of the elements of the game, of the Kickstarter, that we spent the most time on. And again, anyone here who wants to run a Kickstarter, that is the first piece of advice, is develop a very deep understanding of your consumer and come up with some very, very clever ways to build your reward structure so they feel invested, one, but also a desire to maximize that investment in terms of what your game is going to be or what your product is going to be.
That's a definite great tip. Well, you definitely knew your target market, which we kind of talked about. And I was really, and maybe you could share who your exact target market was. We kind of talked about that briefly.
Clearly, and I was a little surprised actually, because we picked up a lot of people who I didn't think were part of our target market. Trading card games have been around for 20 years. They're incredibly popular. It's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft trading card game. And then a myriad of other little ones. They sell billions of dollars worth of product a year. And so there's actually a pretty large group of people, I believe in the tens of millions, that actively play trading card games. And so our audience, for this game and for this Kickstarter to be successful, we didn't have to have that many people. And you can see we ended up with about 17,000, plus the PayPal stuff. We ended up with roughly 20,000 people, but on average they were in for $122. So it worked out pretty close to what I had estimated. So understanding that consumer, targeting that consumer, very specifically the TCG people. Now the game is an MMO TCG. The MMO component is more about community building, and so I didn't know that it would resonate with just your standard third-person action RPG MMO player. But the crazy thing was, we ended up with a number of people who backed the project, who were really just about how inventive and new the idea was, or who were just very excited about my pitch to them. Like I had a lot of people come back to me and just say, you know what, this doesn't look like a game I typically play, but after listening to you talk about it and seeing how passionate you are about it, I just wanted to support your vision for this game. I wanted to help you make this exist. And those are the people that, I've had the chance, I go to the various conventions that we do, like Gen Con, and having a chance to interface with this community has been the biggest blessing of any of this, because their support and their excitement and everything is just so validating and so incredible.
And how did you come up with the goal amount, the dollar amount that you needed to set for your Kickstarter? Because a lot of times people are kind of like, do I go under, do I go over, how do I decide what my number is? Because clearly he exceeded that, their team exceeded that.
Yeah, our goal was 300,000. We ended up at 2.5 million.
Right?
So.
In 30 days.
Yeah.
30 days.
really it is figuring out what is the minimum that you need to deliver on your promise inside the Kickstarter. I'll tell you some interesting, we raised 2.5 million. One of the outcomes of that was a pretty significant number of the people that John and I had gone out and pitched. All of a sudden I'm getting calls from them saying, hey, I think I finally get what you were talking about with that game. I was like, yeah, okay, now you get it. Of course you get it now because you've seen there's an audience. But I will say, make sure that whatever you ask for, if you get just that much, is enough to actually do the job that you've laid out. We've seen a lot of Kickstarters that run into problems later because they didn't have a good estimate of what it would cost, and it's incredibly difficult, especially video game development, which is notorious in terms of running over. I mean, we are incredibly late. It's very, very difficult, but be very careful. I'll tell you, there is a new type of pressure that you have probably, unless there's other people who have done Kickstarters, a new type of pressure that you probably haven't felt, which is a collective's belief in your vision and a collective's sort of vote of trust in terms of giving you a bunch of money to make something for them, and then your need to, one, live up to their expectations, but two, actually deliver something of a quality level that they would be happy with, it's an incredible amount of pressure. It's very, very personal too. Like you saw, it was me up there pitching that stuff, and if this fails or something went wrong, how do you ever live down that you took $2.5 million from people and then shit the bed? And I mean, how do you show your face? Like, I don't know that I could. I joke often that if this thing fails or had failed, I mean, we're very close now, so it's not going to happen, but I made the joke, which everyone hates, that the last Kickstarter update will be a video of me driving my car off a cliff. But it is an incredible amount of pressure, and so my advice would be make sure that you ask for enough money to actually create the product, finish the project, whatever it is that you're doing, ask for enough. Do not try to undershoot it. We had, I believe, undershot ours significantly, but not on purpose. We had believed at the time that that's about what we needed to finish. It became clear that we were going to be able to make a more robust version of what it was we were trying to make, and a much more polished version of what we were trying to make because of the extra money. And so that opens up a whole new can of worms in terms of product development and time and trouble. But fortunately, we've been very lucky, and we've actually done a pretty good job of putting together the project. So it's about to launch, so I'm excited about that.
So is there anything that you would do over in your Kickstarter campaign that you might have changed or done differently? Not really. I'm pretty happy with where we end up. I will say the interesting things about the Kickstarter, and again, I might be answering questions you have coming up, but I'll say the interesting thing about the Kickstarter was we had there's this thing called stretch goals, and what that means is that if you meet certain criteria, I reached $300,000, and if I can reach 350, I'm going to give everyone who's part of the Kickstarter this additional thing. We come up with a big list of them because we felt like we were going to actually blow through this goal and have stretch goals. And we had to throw them away immediately because when the group came together that were going to support Hex, they became a community, which was always what we wanted from minute one, a community. And the community actually gave us some incredible ideas about what they wanted out of this Kickstarter, out of this game, and out of what we were going to do in the future. And so we scrapped all of our rewards almost immediately, well, most of them, because they were terrible, frankly, compared to all the great ideas we were getting from the community. So being able to, one, be prepared, but two, be ready to be flexible in terms of what it is you're offering these consumers was an incredibly important part of what we did. I think I'm getting some reverb here. So I would say be prepared, but also be flexible. If we were to do it over again, maybe we would be a little more prepared. We didn't realize how quickly we were gonna, and the people who are part of our Kickstarter, we would blow through 2 or 3 stretch goals before we could even tell you what the next stretch goal was. So it'd be like, hey, at 350, at 400, at 500, and then we would be, before the next day started, we had already been at 600,000, and so we were 3 stretch goals behind, so we'd have to go back in and say, well, here's the stuff that you got, plus here's the one coming up, which is clearly a very good problem to have, but trying to be prepared but still be flexible is difficult, but something that's very necessary. I will say make sure that you have a place for these people to aggregate on the actual Kickstarter
pages, there are a log line for messages, but having another site for them to go to, starting to get some, was very, very important and helped us build a community. I've said it over and over again, the community that we received from the Kickstarter funds was in some ways more valuable than the actual Kickstarter funds. We have this incredibly passionate group of 20,000 people that are, one, going to be product evangelists, but two, have been sort of helping us guide development and been this incredible resource.
So the last question I have for you tonight is, what's next for Cory?
Yes,
So you're getting ready to...
We're getting ready to launch Hex. We have partners globally at this point helping us do publishing, so we're going to be launching in Europe and China and Latin America. And Hex, I believe Hex is going to be a huge product. There are products out there that have readdressed, and that a good example is a game like League of Legends, which is a thing called a MOBA, which actually takes the RTS genre, which used to be 20 years ago the biggest thing in the world for video games, and sort of recreated what it meant for consumers, and it made it was a modern version of what was very popular in the past, and it became very successful. It's $1 billion a year product. I believe that Hex has the chance to do sort of a similar thing, which is reinvent what trading card games are, and trading card games have been around for 20 years, just about the same amount of time as RTSs, and become incredibly popular. And so for me, my focus will be on Hex for the foreseeable future. One of the other things I should mention also, it just dawned on me, the phone number, you saw the phone number that I put up, those weren't actual tattoos, clearly. One of the great things, yeah, I still have the kidney, not that they're worth much. The incredibly important thing about Kickstarter is that it finally, the internet gave people the chance to reach directly to a consumer, and so it took out a piece of the distribution channel, which was the store. So before, if you wanted to make a product and sell it, you had to get it into a store. The internet allowed you to go directly to consumers. The last piece that was sort of standing in the way of the individual creating products was the money component, the capital, and that's where publishers still held all the power, because they would have to give you the money to make your game, unless you're making something very, very small. Kickstarter has removed that. It's given people the chance to reach directly to the consumers and get the money to make something, and then use the internet to distribute that something. And so we're seeing this opportunity for people who are entrepreneurial to really go to a place that they've never had this chance in the past. If I had been bored 20 years later, I would have never worked in the corporate world. I would have gone directly to Kickstarter and tried to do that. It's an amazing tool, and I will say that one of the most important things about it is this direct connection to the people that you're selling to. And that's the part, and really the psychology behind what I did with that phone number was me saying, I've invited you in to help create this product, I've invited you in to fund and give me the chance to build this product. You are going to be part of this with me. People want to serve a higher cause. And the phone number was my way of saying, listen, I'm not separate from you, I'm part of you, and if you want to talk directly about this with me, then you can. And so I had never seen anyone do anything like that, but I felt like if I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get this done, and they were going to become my partner, they should absolutely have the right to chat with me. And I ended up taking probably 300 or 400 phone calls on that phone. I bought a separate, that wasn't my actual phone. I bought a separate cell phone, and I would take calls on it. I probably took 300 or 400 calls, and my rule was I would not get off the phone with people. They had to get off the phone with me, and so I was not dismissive of people, and I would sit and we would chat about things. I mean, I got a call from a guy at 11 o'clock at night who wanted to talk about Ultima 6, and so I sat on the phone with him for 45 minutes until he was like, all right, I gotta go. I'm like, oh, okay. So we talked about Ultima 6 for almost an hour. But I feel like that was a big part of it, and you would go to the message boards and people would say, that number wasn't bullshit, I actually just talked to Cory and we talked about Ultima 6, no, we talked about the game and that was so cool. And so I would talk to these people, and that would energize them to go back into social media, back onto our websites and say, listen, I talked to the guy, this is not bullshit. And it's not. I mean, none of what I did was disingenuous, it was all incredibly genuine, and that really came through in the pitch and also came through in my relationship with all the people that have become become part of the Kickstarter and part of the family that's making Hex possible. And so again, if you're going to do a Kickstarter, creating some level of access with the people that are backing you, making sure that you're doing updates every single week. Don't do too many, but every single week a new update, being part of the message boards, being part of the dialogue. Understand that for that 30 days, you are going to be working 24 hours a day, and that nothing else is going to be important to you, because every ounce of focus you have will go into it. It's also incredibly oddly addictive, watching every day the number get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, if it's successful. I guess if it wasn't successful, that would become depressing, but it was successful, so there you go.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give Cory a round of applause.